Every month for almost 14 years, my husband sent money to his sick sister. I never suspected anything until the day I met her in person. What I discovered that day changed my life forever. My name is Teresa. I'm 76 years old, and today I'm sharing a story I've kept secret for a long time. Before I begin, if you're watching now, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It helps me continue sharing my stories with you all. Let's go back to 1965. I was only 16 when I met Arnold. He was a handsome, hard-working young man with a promising future as a truck driver. Back then, being a trucker was a respected job. The pay was good, and I, a simple girl from the suburbs of Chicago, daughter of farmers who moved to the city looking for a better life, saw in him a chance to build a family. We got married after 6 months of dating. My mother said it was too fast, that I barely knew the guy, but that's how things were back then. You fell in love and got married quickly. It wasn't like today where couples live together first to see if it works out. We married in church with a veil and gown, asking for God's blessing for the marriage to last forever. Our beginning was difficult, as it was for most young couples. We lived in a small bedroom and kitchen in the back of his aunt's house. Arnold traveled a lot driving the Chicago-Indianapolis-New York route. Sometimes he'd be gone 3-4 days. I understood it was his job. He always said, "Teresa, it's for you and the family we're going to build that I drive across this country." Soon, our first child, Charles Edward, was born. 2 years later, Mary Elizabeth arrived. And 3 years after that, Joseph Andrew. 3 children to raise. And there I was, juggling between diapers, bottles, and housekeeping, while Arnold continued on the road. It was around our 2nd year of marriage that he told me about his sister Celia. According to Arnold, she lived in Indianapolis and had health problems. He never specified exactly what the illness was, just said it was serious and that she needed constant help. Every month without fail, he would set aside a good portion of his salary to send to her. "Teresa, she's my only sister. Our parents are gone. We only have each other. I can't abandon her," he would tell me with those brown eyes that convinced me of everything. And I, naive as I was, believed him. I even thought it was beautiful, that brotherly love, that concern. Many times when money was tight at home, when we couldn't afford school supplies for the kids, or when Charles Edward's sneakers were worn through, I would look at the envelope Arnold set aside for Celia and feel a pang in my heart. But I never questioned it. It was his family. I respected that. The years went by. Our life remained simple but stable. We lived in a small 2-story house in the suburbs. The children attended public school. I took in laundry to help with expenses, but we didn't go hungry. Arnold earned reasonably well as a truck driver, even though a considerable part of his salary went to this Celia. Something I found strange but didn't question much was the fact that we never visited this sister-in-law. During holidays, birthdays, there was never an invitation to meet her. When I suggested it, Arnold always changed the subject. He said she was very private, didn't like visitors, that her home environment needed to be controlled because of her illness. "One day we will, Teresa, but now is not a good time," he always answered. And I, raised to be a good wife, not to question my husband's decisions, accepted it. Today I wonder how I could have been so blind, so naive. But in those days, that's how it was. Women accepted, stayed quiet, trusted. The routine was always the same. Arnold would leave for his trips, come home for a few days, and leave again. When he said he was going to New York, the trips lasted longer, usually a whole week. "It's farther away. Teresa, and the New York loads always pay more," he explained. And it made sense to me. It was in 1978, when we had been married for 13 years, that things began to change. Our children were growing up. Charles Edward was 12, Mary Elizabeth was 10, and Joseph Andrew was 7. I had managed to get a job as a sewing assistant in a small clothing factory near our home. I didn't earn much, but it helped with expenses, and I liked the work. I always had a knack for sewing. Learned it from my mother since I was little. That March of 1978, I remember it like it was yesterday. I was arranging Arnold's things for another trip to New York. As I always did, I washed and ironed his shirts, sorted his socks, checked if any buttons were missing from his uniform. It was a routine I had faithfully followed for years. I picked up his coat, that navy blue coat he always wore on trips, to check if it needed any repairs. That's when I felt something in the inside pocket. I put my hand in and pulled out a homemade birthday card decorated with colorful dots. I opened the card and read, "Happy birthday, my love. May God give you many years of life and health to continue being the wonderful father and husband you are. With all our love, Celia and Deborah." My heart raced. I read those words over and over, trying to find some explanation. Father, husband. Who was Deborah? Why was his supposedly sick sister calling him my love and husband? Arnold's birthday had been in February a month earlier. I had made a simple cake, bought a small gift, a new wallet since his was very worn. He barely ate the cake, said he was tired from the trip, and thanked me for the gift without much enthusiasm. Now I understood why that cold reaction. He had probably already celebrated with them, whoever they were. I put the card in my apron pocket with trembling hands. I didn't confront Arnold at that moment. Something inside me said I needed more proof, needed to better understand what was happening before making any accusations. Arnold left for another trip to New York the next day, not suspecting that I had found the card. He kissed me on the forehead as he always did, hugged the children, and promised to bring a chocolate bar for each one when he returned. The scene was so familiar, so normal. But now there was a shadow over it, a doubt growing inside me. In the days that followed, I was alert to any detail, any clue that might help me understand what was happening. I didn't mention it to anyone, not even my best friend Louise, who lived next door. It was a pain, a suspicion that I kept just for myself. It was on Thursday of that week that I received a phone call that would change everything. The phone rang around 3:00 in the afternoon. Back then, having a telephone was rare in homes. We had managed to install one a few months earlier, and it was a source of pride in the neighborhood. "Hello. Good afternoon. This is Star Road Trucking Company. Could I speak with Mr. Arnold?" "He's not here. He's traveling. I'm his wife, Teresa." "Mrs. Teresa, we need to speak with him urgently. We have a load for New York that needs to leave today. The driver who was supposed to take it had a problem, and we thought of Arnold." "But he's already in New York," I said, confused. "He left Monday morning and should be returning soon." There was silence on the other end of the line. "In New York, impossible, ma'am. The load he was supposed to take only got ready last night. He didn't leave for New York this week." I felt as if the ground was opening beneath my feet. My voice trembled as I responded, "There must be some mistake. My husband left for New York on Monday. He's worked for you for over 15 years. "Ma'am, we know. That's precisely why we're calling him, but he didn't pick up any load for New York this week. Perhaps you're confused." I hung up the phone with a trembling hand. No, I wasn't confused. Arnold told me clearly he was going to New York. He kissed me on the forehead, hugged the children, and left with his travel bag. Where had he gone? The doubt grew inside me like a tumor. That same week, while looking for the children's documents for school re-enrollment, I opened the drawer where Arnold kept his papers. At the bottom of the drawer, hidden under various documents, I found a checkbook from a different bank than ours and an envelope with Celia's name and an address in Indianapolis. I wrote the address on a piece of paper and kept it behind the photo in our wedding portrait. The irony didn't escape me, hiding the evidence of my husband's possible betrayal alongside the memory of the day we vowed fidelity to each other before God. The days that followed were filled with anguish. I needed to know the truth, but I was afraid of what I might discover. What if Arnold had another family? What if that Deborah mentioned in the card was his daughter? How would I face this reality with 3 children to raise and very little professional experience? But I've always been a woman of courage, even when I seemed fragile on the outside. I decided I would go to Indianapolis to that address to discover who Celia really was and what she meant in my husband's life. I waited until Arnold's next trip to New York, which happened 2 weeks later. On Friday, as soon as he left, I took the children to my friend Louise's house. "I need to take care of some business in Indianapolis," I told her without going into details. "I'll be back tomorrow night. Could you watch the children?" Louise, always helpful, accepted without asking too many questions. She must have noticed something strange in my behavior over the past few days, but respected my silence. I took my savings money I kept hidden in the hot chocolate tin at the back of the kitchen cabinet. It wasn't much, but it would cover the round-trip bus fare to Indianapolis and leave some for emergencies. I put the birthday card in my purse. It was the only concrete proof I had. I wore my best dress, a light blue one, with small flowers that I had sewn myself. I combed my hair neatly and applied subtle lipstick. I wanted to look presentable to face whatever I might find at that address in Indianapolis. I caught the bus at the station early in the morning. The trip to Indianapolis took about 3 hours, but to me it seemed like an eternity. My heart was beating so hard that I felt the other passengers could hear it. What would I find? Was I about to discover that my entire married life had been a lie? Or would there be a reasonable explanation for all this, and I would return home relieved, laughing at my fertile imagination? When I got off the bus in Indianapolis, I took another city bus that would take me to the neighborhood indicated in the address. It was a nice neighborhood, clearly more affluent than mine. The houses were larger, the gardens well kept, the streets cleaner. I finally reached the address. It was a corner house painted in light yellow with a beautiful garden in front and a small shop in the garage. A discreet sign announced, "Celia's Atelier, Custom Clothing." I took a deep breath and opened the gate. The sound of the doorbell made my heart jump. I was about to discover the truth that would change my life forever. I entered the small atelier, trying to control the trembling of my hands. The shop was beautiful, well organized, with various clothing items displayed on racks and mannequins. Colorful fabrics were arranged on shelves, much more luxurious than the scraps I sewed with at home. It was a welcoming, feminine environment that under different circumstances I would have admired. But at that moment, each detail only increased my anguish. A young girl appeared from the back of the shop. She must have been about 14, with long brown hair tied in a braid and eyes. My God, those eyes were identical to my Charles Edwards, identical to Arnold's. "Good morning, ma'am. Can I help you?" she asked with a friendly smile. I stood paralyzed for a few seconds, observing every detail of that young face, the shape of her nose, the slightly square chin, even the way she smiled with her head slightly tilted to the side. Everything reminded me of Arnold. "I'm looking for Celia," I managed to say, my voice barely coming out. "My mom went out to buy materials, but my dad is home." "Would you like to speak with him?" My dad. Those two simple words confirmed what my heart already knew. Deborah. She was the girl from the birthday card, my husband's daughter, with another woman. "Yes, please," I replied automatically, though I wasn't prepared for what would follow. "Dad, there's a customer here looking for you," she shouted toward the back of the house. The seconds that followed seemed like an eternity. I heard footsteps approaching, and then there, standing in the doorway that separated the shop from the residence, was Arnold, my husband, the man who at that very moment should have been driving a truck to New York. Our eyes met, and I saw his face lose all color. His eyes widened in pure terror. For an instant it seemed as if he had seen a ghost, and perhaps in a way that's exactly what it was, the ghost of the life he had built with lies finally coming to collect its debts. "Teresa," he murmured so softly I almost didn't hear. The girl looked confused from one to the other. "You know each other?" Before either of us could answer, a woman entered through the front door carrying bags. She was a pretty woman about my age, well-groomed hair, red lipstick, wearing an elegant dress that certainly cost more than all my clothes put together. "I'm back, honey. I found that fabric Mrs. Wilson wanted for the wedding dress." She stopped when she saw me. "I'm sorry. I didn't know we had a customer." "Celia," Arnold said, his voice choked. "This is Teresa." She looked at me without understanding at first. Then slowly her face changed. First confusion, then surprise, and finally the same expression of horror I had seen on Arnold's face. "Teresa, you're—" She didn't complete the sentence, but she didn't need to. She knew who I was. I took the card from my purse with trembling hands and held it up. "I found this in his coat." Celia dropped the bags on the floor. Deborah looked at all of us confused, trying to understand what was happening. "Mom, Dad, who is she?" "Deborah, sweetie, go to your room," Celia asked. But the girl didn't move. "No, she has the right to know," I said, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. "After all, she's also a victim in this story." I turned to the young girl whose eyes were now filled with fear and confusion. "My name is Teresa. I've been married to your father for 13 years. We have 3 children together." The girl's face contorted in shock. She looked at her father, then at her mother, searching for some denial, some sign that what I was saying was a lie. But their silence confirmed everything. "It's not true, is it, Dad?" she begged, tears beginning to stream down her face. "Tell me it's not true." Arnold seemed to have aged 10 years in those few minutes. He ran his hand over his face, a gesture I knew so well. He always did it when he was cornered. "Deborah, I can explain." "Explain what?" Celia interrupted, her voice trembling with anger. "That you have another family, that everything you've told us all these years was a lie." I sat down in a nearby chair. My legs could no longer support me. The shop that minutes before had seemed so cozy now suffocated me. I looked around and noticed the photographs on the wall. Arnold embracing Celia and Deborah smiling in outings, birthdays, family moments that were stolen from me and my children. "How long?" I asked, looking directly at Arnold. "Since when have you been maintaining this double life?" He lowered his head, unable to face me. "I met Celia in 1963 before you, Teresa. When Celia got pregnant in 1964, I was already dating you. I didn't know what to do." "So you decided to marry me and maintain 2 families." My voice came out louder than I intended. "For 14 years, Arnold, 14 years of lies." Celia approached me, her eyes now filled with tears. "He told me he was a widower when Deborah was born, that he couldn't officially marry me because of his first wife's pension. I believed him, Teresa." Deborah, leaning against the wall, sobbed quietly. My heart ached for her, that innocent girl born amid so many lies. "And the money?" I asked, turning again to Arnold. "The money you said you sent to your sick sister every month." He didn't answer. But he didn't need to. It was obvious. The money that could have given my children a better life, that could have paid for courses, new clothes, dental treatment for Mary Elizabeth, was being used to maintain this other family, this beautiful house, this shop. "Do you have children?" Celia suddenly asked, drying her tears with the back of her hand, smudging the red lipstick. 3, I answered. Charles Edward 12, Mary Elizabeth 10, and Joseph Andrew 7. And I hesitated for a moment, my hand instinctively going to my belly. "I just found out I'm expecting our 4th. Arnold raised his head abruptly upon hearing this, the shock evident on his face. He didn't know. I had only confirmed it the week before, but with all this situation I hadn't found the right moment to tell him. "Pregnant," he murmured, his face as pale as paper. "Yes, Arnold, we're having another child you will abandon half the time to live your other life." Celia sat down too, looking as destroyed as I felt. "How could you, Arnold? How could you do this to us, to Deborah, to her children?" She pointed at me, her voice choked with tears. "We were 2 families waiting for you, believing in you, loving you." Arnold looked like a cornered animal. He looked from one to the other, searching for words that wouldn't come. Finally, he said the only thing he probably thought could save him. "I love you both. I love both families. Please try to understand. I didn't want to hurt anyone." Anger rose inside me like a wave. "Didn't want to hurt anyone? And what are you doing now, Arnold? What have you done all these years? Every time you left home saying you were going to work to give us a better life, you were coming here. Every time you said you were in New York, you were here with them. Every penny that could have gone to our children's education, to improving our house, to giving them what we didn't have, you spent here." I looked around the house, much more comfortable than the small 2-story house where I raised my children. "Look at this place, Arnold. Look at the difference. While I took in laundry to supplement our income, you set up this shop for her." Celia seemed to realize something for the first time. "You said you took in laundry. Arnold told me you were a teacher, that you had a good salary, that you didn't need financial help." I laughed bitterly. "Teacher, I barely finished elementary school, Celia. I work as a sewing assistant in a clothing factory and do laundry in my spare time. We live in a small 2-story house in the suburbs of Chicago. Our children have never had an expensive toy, never taken a vacation." Turning to Arnold, I continued, "That's why you always resisted when I suggested we save for the children's education. That's why you always changed the subject when I talked about renovating the house. The money already had a set destination, didn't it?" Deborah, who had been quiet for a while, suddenly spoke, her voice broken by sobs. I have siblings, and never knew it. The question, so innocent and at the same time so filled with pain, broke something inside me. I approached her slowly, like someone approaching a frightened animal. "Yes, Deborah, you have 3 siblings. Charles Edward looks a lot like you, has the same eyes. Mary Elizabeth is quiet like you seem to be, and Joseph Andrew is a handful, but he has a huge heart. They don't know about you just as you didn't know about them." Tears flowed freely down the girl's face. And now what happens now? It was the question that had been echoing in my mind since the moment I found the card. What would happen now? How would I continue my life knowing that everything I believed was a lie? Arnold, perhaps sensing he was losing control of the situation, tried to approach me. "Teresa, let's talk. Let's resolve this. We don't need to make hasty decisions." I stepped back. "Don't touch me. I don't want to hear any more lies." Celia, who had been silent, suddenly stood up. "You slept at my house last night. You said you'd stay here until Sunday, that you'd only return to Chicago on Monday, that you'd take Deborah to the movies tomorrow." She turned to me, a new understanding in her eyes. "When he was with you, he said he was traveling to New York, right? And when he was with me, he told you he was working." I nodded, feeling a strange connection with this woman who until minutes ago was just a name, a supposedly sick sister. "He told you I was his sister?" she asked incredulously. "Yes, his sick sister who needed constant financial help. That's how he justified the money he sent every month." Celia shook her head, laughing without humor. "And he told me he had a nephew with problems, son of a brother who lived upstate, that he was helping financially with the treatments." We looked at each other, 2 women deceived by the same man, 2 lives built on lies. At that moment, I felt closer to Celia than to the man with whom I had shared my bed for 13 years. Arnold began to speak again, trying to explain, trying to justify the unjustifiable, but his words were hollow, empty of meaning. He spoke of love, of not wanting to hurt anyone, of how things had gotten out of his control. As he spoke, a decision formed inside me. I didn't know how my life would be from now on, how I would raise 4 children alone, how I would face society as a separated woman in the 70s. But I knew with absolute certainty that I could not remain married to a man who had lived on lies for so long. "Arnold," I interrupted his flow of excuses. "I don't want to hear any more. I'm going to catch the bus back to Chicago now. When you return home, I want you to get your things and leave. I don't want you near me or my children." "Teresa, please, let's talk." "There's nothing to talk about. You destroyed our family. You lied to me, to our children, to them." I pointed to Celia and Deborah. "There's no going back." I turned to leave, but looked one last time at Celia and Deborah before I did. "I'm sorry you went through this. You don't deserve it." I left the shop onto the sunny Indianapolis street, feeling strangely light despite the pain tearing at my chest. The truth, as painful as it was liberating. On the bus back to Chicago, as tears silently rolled down my face, I began to plan the next steps. How would I tell my children? How would I survive financially? How would I rebuild my life from the broken pieces Arnold left behind? I didn't know what the future held for me. But I knew that day in Indianapolis had been the end of one life and the beginning of another. A life without lies, without betrayals. A life that, although uncertain, would be authentically mine. Going home that day was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. While the bus traveled from Indianapolis to Chicago, I looked out the window without really seeing the landscape. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. How would I tell the children? What would I say to the neighbors? How would we survive financially? When I got home, it was already night. I picked up my children from Louise's house, who immediately noticed something was wrong. My swollen eyes and the desolate expression on my face must have given me away. "Did something happen, Teresa?" she whispered, while the children played in the living room. "We'll talk later," I replied, unable to form more words without breaking down. I took the children home and tried to act normally, but Charles Edward, always so observant, noticed I wasn't well. "Mom, are you sick?" he asked, his eyes reflecting concern beyond his 12 years. "No, son, just a little tired from the trip." I forced a smile that felt like a grimace. I put the children to bed early that night, telling a story about brave knights and dragons that I could barely focus on. When I finally closed the door to their room, I collapsed on the living room sofa and cried like I had never cried before. For myself, for my children, even for Celia and Deborah. All victims of Arnold's web of lies. Sunday came and went with no sign of Arnold. Monday passed in tense anticipation. On Tuesday, when the children were already asking insistently about their father, I received a call from the trucking company. Arnold had quit. He gave no explanations, just left a letter resigning from his position and never showed up again. That's when the terrible reality sank in. He wouldn't return, wouldn't have the courage to face what he had done. He would abandon me and the children, just as he had probably abandoned Celia and Deborah. The man who once promised to build a future with me had vanished, leaving nothing but shattered promises and mounting bills. The days that followed were pure desperation. Examining our finances revealed a bleaker picture than I had imagined. The money we had saved would barely cover a month of expenses. My salary as a sewing assistant wouldn't be enough to support the house and 4 children, 3 already born and 1 on the way. I sat at the kitchen table late one night, bills spread before me, calculator in hand. The mortgage payment, utilities, groceries, school supplies, the numbers refused to add up to anything but disaster. That night I cried until there were no tears left, then washed my face and made a decision. I would not crumble. I would find a way. It was at this moment that sewing, the skill I learned from my mother since I was little, became my lifeline. I began to accept small repair and alteration jobs for the neighborhood. I put ads in local markets offering my services at reasonable prices. I approached mothers at the school gate when picking up the children, mentioning that I could mend torn uniforms or adjust hems. At first, the additional income was so little that it barely made a difference in the budget. But gradually, word spread about the quality of my work. People began to seek me out not just for repairs, but to make new clothes, curtains, tablecloths. My work was neat, my stitches precise, and my prices fair. Soon, the living room of our small house was transformed into an improvised atelier. Fabric scraps, threads, and an old sewing machine I had bought secondhand occupied the space where Arnold once sat watching television. I worked into the night after the children were asleep, my fingers sometimes bleeding from pinpricks, my eyes strained from focusing on tiny stitches in poor light. Meanwhile, my pregnancy progressed, as did the curiosity of the neighborhood. In the 1970s, a woman alone pregnant raising 3 children without a husband was the target of whispers and judgmental looks. I invented a story that Arnold had found a better job in another state and that we would soon move there. It was easier than explaining the truth, than exposing my children to the shame of having a father who led a double life. Charles Edward, old enough to understand something was deeply wrong, cornered me one evening after his siblings were asleep. "Mom, Dad isn't coming back, is he?" His young face bore a maturity no child his age should have to develop. I couldn't lie to him. Not anymore. Not after all the lies that had already poisoned our lives. "No, sweetheart, I don't think he is. Did he find another family? Is that why you went to Indianapolis?" His perception stunned me into silence. I sat him down at the kitchen table, weighing each word carefully. "How did you know I went to Indianapolis?" "I heard you tell Mrs. Louise, and I found a bus ticket in your purse when I was looking for money for ice cream." His eyes, so like his father's, watched me steadily. "I'm not a baby anymore, Mom." No, he wasn't. Arnold's betrayal had robbed him of that, too. I told him a simplified version of the truth, that his father had another family, that he had been living a lie, that he had chosen to disappear rather than face the consequences of his actions. Charles Edward listened without interrupting, his young shoulders seeming to bear the weight of each word. When I finished, he stood up and hugged me tightly. "We'll be okay, Mom. I'll help you." I remember the day I received an unexpected call. It was Celia from Indianapolis. My heart raced as I gripped the receiver. "Has Arnold returned there?" Her voice sounded tense, almost hopeful. "No," I responded, twisting the phone cord around my finger. "He quit the trucking company and disappeared completely." There was silence on the other end of the line, then a sigh. "Here too, left only a letter asking for forgiveness, saying he didn't deserve either of us." I can't explain what I felt at that moment. Anger, of course, for him abandoning the children, but also a strange relief at not having to face him, not having to hear more lies. The conversation continued tentative at first, then more open. "How are you?" Celia asked, surprising me with what seemed like genuine concern. "Surviving," I admitted honestly. "And you and Deborah?" "Surviving too. The shop is supporting us at least." Another silence fell between us, not entirely uncomfortable. Two women united by betrayal, trying to navigate the aftermath of one man's selfishness. "Teresa." Celia's voice turned serious. "If you find out where he is, let me know. Not for me, but for Deborah. She needs answers." "Of course," I promised. "And if you learn anything, let me know too. My children also deserve to know." We hung up with a strange sense of camaraderie. We were two women abandoned by the same man, two mothers trying to protect their children from the pain of rejection. In August 1978, my youngest daughter Beatrice was born. The delivery was difficult, complicated by the stress and worries of the previous months. But when I held that little girl in my arms, a new feeling of determination was born in me. I would raise these 4 children alone with dignity and would do everything so they would never lack the essentials. The months that followed were full of work and little rest. I continued at the clothing factory during the day while Louise watched Beatrice. In the evenings and weekends, I sewed at home, filling orders for alterations and simple garments. The older children helped as they could, Charles Edward making small deliveries of finished clothes to nearby customers, Mary Elizabeth caring for the baby, while I worked Joseph Andrew helping with household chores. By Christmas of 1978, we had settled into a routine of sorts. It wasn't easy, but we were managing. I had paid the mortgage on time each month, kept food on the table, even managed to buy modest gifts for the children. The dining table served as both sewing station and homework center. The living room doubled as a fitting area for customers. I filed for divorce in early 1979. I didn't know where Arnold was, but his abandonment made the process easier. The lawyer, a kind older man who reduced his fee when he heard my situation, explained that after publishing notices in several newspapers without response, the court would grant the divorce on grounds of abandonment. It was painful to have to explain everything, to see our story recorded in official documents, but I needed that divorce, needed that paper that said I was free, that I could rebuild my life without the shadow of a man who had treated it as disposable. The neighborhood, of course, talked. At that time, being a divorced woman was almost a stigma. There were looks of pity whispers when I passed. Some friends distanced themselves as if divorce was contagious, but others like Louise remained by my side, offering support and friendship when I needed it most. "People who judge haven't walked in your shoes," Louise told me one evening as we sat on her porch, watching our children play. "Let them talk. They'll find something new to gossip about next month." She was right, of course. Eventually, the whispers subsided. The divorced woman raising 4 children alone became just another fact of neighborhood life, no more remarkable than the color of my front door or the flowers I planted in spring. It was around this time that I received a proposal that would change my life. Mrs. Wilson, a loyal customer for whom I had done various sewing jobs, owned a small fabric store in the center of the neighborhood. One day, she appeared at my house with an unexpected offer. "Teresa, I'm thinking of expanding my store. I want to open a dressmaking space, but I need someone who understands the business, who has good taste and skillful hands. I thought of you." The proposal was tempting. A fixed salary better than at the factory where I worked as an assistant and commission on pieces sold. I would have regular hours, could bring Beatrice with me to a small play area in the back, and would still have evenings free for my own clients. I accepted immediately, seeing an opportunity to improve my children's lives. My first day at Wilson's Fabrics felt like stepping into a different world. The store was bright and organized, with bolts of fabric arranged by color and type, nothing like the crowded and noisy factory where I had worked. Mrs. Wilson, a widow in her 60s with a sharp business mind but failing eyesight, taught me everything about the retail side of the business: how to order, stock, manage inventory, handle customer relations. I absorbed it all eagerly, recognizing that this knowledge could be valuable beyond just my current position. I worked hard at Mrs. Wilson's store during the day and continued with my extra work at night. Gradually, I began to create my own pieces, simple but elegant designs that pleased customers, Mrs. Wilson, noticing my talent, began to give me more creative freedom, allowing me to order fabrics I thought would sell well, design window displays, even start a small catalog of custom designs. In 1980, a year after starting at the store, I received another unexpected call from Celia. "Teresa, I need your help," she said, her voice choked with emotion. She told me her shop was doing poorly, that debts were piling up, that she didn't know how to proceed. The economy had taken a downturn, and luxury items like custom clothing were the first things people cut from their budgets. Arnold had never given any more news, and she and Deborah were about to lose their house. I don't know how to explain what motivated me. Maybe female solidarity. Maybe the memory of Deborah's frightened look that day in Indianapolis. Maybe the thought that it could have been me in her place, would have been me, if not for Mrs. Wilson's offer. Without much reflection, I heard myself saying, "Come to Chicago. I know someone who needs a fabric salesperson." There was silence on the other end of the line. "You would do that for us after everything. Arnold is the one who wronged us both," I replied, surprising myself with the absence of bitterness in my voice. "You and Deborah are as much victims as me and my children." 2 weeks later, Celia and Deborah arrived in Chicago with few suitcases and many broken dreams. I had arranged for them to stay temporarily in a room I rented from Louise, who, after hearing the whole story, agreed to help. "You're either a saint or crazy," Louise told me, shaking her head, "but your heart's in the right place." I introduced Celia to Mrs. Wilson, who, impressed with her knowledge of fabrics and her way with customers, hired her immediately. Celia had worked in a high-end boutique before meeting Arnold, knowledge she had used to start her own shop. Her experience complemented my sewing skills perfectly. Deborah, then 15, entered the same school as my children, though in different grades due to age differences. The first day, I walked her and Charles Edward to school together, watching their awkward silence, the occasional glances they stole at each other, recognizing the similar features, the shared blood. It was strange at first, this unlikely arrangement. My children, to whom I had finally told age-appropriate versions of the truth about their father, were confused. Hurt, especially Charles Edward, who at 13 already perfectly understood what his father had done. "Why are you helping them, Mom?" he asked me one day, his voice heavy with the weight of betrayal. "He abandoned us because of them." "No, son," I responded, taking his hands in mine, feeling the roughness that came from helping with deliveries chores no boy his age should have had to shoulder. "Your father abandoned us because of himself, because of his own wrong choices. Celia and Deborah are victims just like us, and in this world women need to help each other." He didn't look convinced, but he nodded, accepting, if not yet understanding. Gradually, a strange friendship began to form between our families. Celia, who initially seemed uncomfortable with my generosity, began to reciprocate in the ways she could. She brought treats for the children, helped Mary Elizabeth with math lessons, a subject in which she excelled. She offered to look after Beatrice when I needed to work late. Deborah, after initial rejection by my children, began to get closer to them, especially Charles Edward. The two discovered that besides their appearance, they shared a love for books and stories. I would sometimes find them huddled in a corner of the living room, discussing characters and plots with an intensity that made my heart both ache and swell with hope. It was painful, and at the same time comforting to see them together, discovering this late sibling bond. I wondered what Arnold would think if he could see them, his secret daughter and his firstborn son bridging the gap he had created, forming a connection he had denied them. The arrangement with Celia working at Mrs. Wilson's store functioned surprisingly well. Her elegant manners and knowledge of high-end fabrics attracted a wealthier clientele than the store had previously served. My practical sewing skills and designs appealed to working women who needed durable, fashionable clothes at reasonable prices. Together, we were bringing in more business than Mrs. Wilson had seen in years. In 1981, Mrs. Wilson decided to retire and offered the store for sale. The price was beyond my means, but she, who had become almost a second mother to me, proposed a deal I hadn't dared hope for. "I want you to have the store, Teresa," she told me one evening as we were closing up. "You can pay me in monthly installments while you manage the business. I know you'll make it work." That night I couldn't sleep. Owning a business had never been part of my plans. I had always seen myself as a worker, never an entrepreneur. but as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I began to envision possibilities I had never allowed myself to consider before. The next morning, I called Celia for a talk. We met at a small diner halfway between our homes, sitting across from each other with cups of coffee growing cold between us. "Mrs. Wilson is selling the store." I began watching her face carefully. "She's offered it to me with payment terms I could manage." Celia nodded, her expression neutral. "That's wonderful, Teresa. You deserve it after all your hard work. What if we became partners?" The words tumbled out before I could second-guess myself. "You understand sales and fabrics. I understand dressmaking. Together we can transform this store into something bigger." She looked at me with surprise, then emotion. "You would trust me like that, Teresa?" "It wasn't you who lied to me, Celia." I replied, the truth of it settling deep in my bones. It was him who lied to us both. Thus was born New Beginning Clothing, a name that perfectly reflected our story. We signed the papers the following week, becoming business partners in the eyes of the law, though we had already been partners in survival for months. Celia took care of sales and administration. I handled creation and production. At first, it was just the two of us working from dawn to dusk, but soon the business began to grow and we were able to hire assistants. First one, then another, mostly women like us, who needed flexible hours and understanding employers. The day we hung the new sign above the storefront, New Beginning Clothing, in elegant blue letters, felt like a milestone. Celia and I stood on the sidewalk looking up at it. Our children gathered around us, a strange family forged in the fire of betrayal, but tempered by shared resilience. "We did it," Celia whispered, slipping her hand into mine. "He never believed I could run a business, said I was too impractical, too focused on appearances. He told me I was too simple, too uneducated to ever be more than a factory worker." I confess the sting of those words still fresh years later. We looked at each other, then really looked, and burst into laughter that drew curious glances from passers-by. We laughed until tears came, the absurdity of it all, suddenly overwhelming. Two women who should have been enemies becoming each other's strength, two families shattered by the same man now rebuilding together. The years passed and the store prospered. We moved to a larger space, hired more seamstresses, expanded the product line. We even began supplying uniforms to some local companies, including, ironically, the same trucking company where Arnold had worked. The children grew up against the backdrop of our expanding business. Charles Edward, always studious, finished high school with honors and earned a scholarship to college. The day he received his acceptance letter was one of the proudest of my life. My son, who had stepped up to be the man of the house at just 13, would have opportunities I could only have dreamed of. Mary Elizabeth showed an early interest in design, sitting beside me as I created patterns suggesting color combinations that revealed an innate eye for fashion. By 16, she was designing her own pieces that we sold in a special section of the store we called Me Originals. Joseph Andrew, with his outgoing personality and gift for conversation, naturally gravitated toward the sales floor, charming customers and developing relationships with suppliers. He had his father's easy smile, but thankfully none of his deception. And Beatrice, my youngest born, amid such turbulence, grew to be a serious and determined child. While the others were drawn to the family business, she showed an early interest in questions of justice and fairness. "It's not right," became her childhood refrain, whether discussing playground disputes or larger societal issues she glimpsed on the evening news. Deborah, now part of our extended family, graduated high school and enrolled in business courses at the local community college. She brought new ideas to the store: computerized inventory systems, targeted advertising campaigns, employee benefit programs that made us more competitive in hiring skilled workers. Our blended family celebrated holidays together, shared Sunday dinners, weathered illnesses, and school problems as one unit. The initial awkwardness had long since faded, replaced by genuine affection and the deep bonds that form when people choose to be family rather than being born to it. It wasn't all smooth sailing, of course. The economic recession of the early 1980s hit our business hard. Orders decreased, materials costs increased, and for a while it seemed we might lose everything we had built. Those were nights of worried conversations at the kitchen table, of poring over accounting books, looking for ways to cut costs without cutting quality of prayers whispered into pillows that the children wouldn't hear my fears. It was Charles Edward, home from college for the summer, who suggested we diversify into repair and adjustment services that could be priced by hours of work rather than just the value of the final product. Joseph Andrew found a cotton producers cooperative in rural areas that accepted payment terms that allowed us to survive in the frozen market. And Mary Elizabeth created a line of accessories made with scraps that would otherwise have been discarded, transforming potential waste into a new source of income. We weathered the storm together, emerging stronger, more innovative, and more determined than ever. This pattern would repeat throughout the years. Challenges arising, the family coming together to find solutions, the business adapting and growing. In 1990, when the country entered another recession, we faced a different kind of crisis. We had saved for years to buy a larger property for the store, and suddenly, a large part of that money was inaccessible. There were months of hardship, reorganization, even more intense work. It was during this time that Celia began to show the first signs of fatigue. Older than me by a few years, she was already in her 50s, and the stress of previous years had taken its toll. It started with small things: frequent headaches, lack of appetite, fatigue that didn't pass with rest. At first, we all attributed it to the stress of the business, the long hours, the constant worry about money. But when she developed a persistent cough, and I noticed her wincing when carrying bolts of fabric, I insisted she see a doctor. In early 1991 came the diagnosis that devastated us: breast cancer already at an advanced stage. Celia had ignored the signs, too busy taking care of the business, too busy ensuring Deborah's future. The doctor's prognosis was guarded. Treatment options existed, but the cancer had already spread to her lymph nodes. The months that followed were an emotional roller coaster. Surgery, chemotherapy, radiation. Good days followed by terrible days. Deborah, devastated by the possibility of losing her mother, found strength to continue managing the store while I accompanied Celia to treatments. My children stepped up once again, taking on additional responsibilities at home and in the business without complaint. It was strange how life came full circle. There I was, caring for the woman I once considered my rival, the other woman, in my husband's life, holding her hand during chemotherapy sessions, helping her eat on days when she was too weak to lift a spoon, reading to her when her eyes were too tired to focus on the words. On one of those afternoons at the hospital, while waiting for the doctor, Celia held my hand and said something I'll never forget. "You know, Teresa," her voice thin but determined, "when you showed up at that shop in Indianapolis, I thought it was the worst day of my life. But today, I see it was the best. That day freed me from a life of lies and brought me you, the best friend I've ever had." I couldn't respond, emotion closing my throat. I just squeezed her hand tightly, and in that pressure was everything I couldn't say. Gratitude for her friendship, sorrow for her suffering love that had grown from the most unlikely soil. Celia fought bravely for 4 years. She had periods of remission when she returned to work part-time at the store, always with a colorful scarf covering her hairless head, her smile perhaps dimmer, but her spirit undimmed. She had relapses that took her back to the hospital for weeks, each time returning more depleted, but still determined to live each day fully. "I'm not dying of cancer," she would tell worried customers who noticed her weight loss. "I'm living with it. There's a difference." In 1995, on Deborah's 30th birthday, she left us peacefully in her bed, holding my hand on one side and her daughter's on the other. Her last words were about the spring collection, a line of pastel dresses she had been helping design from her sickbed. "Make sure the lavender one has deeper pockets," she whispered. "Women always need pockets." The grief was profound, not just for Deborah, but for all of us. Celia had become the heart of our strange, recomposed family. Her absence left a void that seemed impossible to fill. The store, though, continuing to function under the competent administration of Deborah and my children, seemed less alive without her presence. It was during this period of mourning that I made a decision that surprised everyone. Using my savings and a loan that Charles Edward helped me secure with his now established engineering career, I bought a larger house with enough space for all of us. Me, my 4 children, and Deborah if she wanted to join us. I remember the expression on her face when I made the invitation, a mixture of surprise emotion and a touch of hesitation. "Are you sure, Teresa? Wouldn't it be strange for your children?" Her eyes, red-rimmed from weeks of grief, searched mine for any sign of doubt. "My children have considered you family for years, Deborah, and so have I." I assured her, meaning every word. "Your mother was like a sister to me, and you are like a daughter. Our family has never been conventional anyway." She accepted, and so we began a new chapter. The new house, though not luxurious, was spacious and welcoming. Everyone had their own room, and there was still space for a sewing room, where I continued creating even if I spent less time at the store. The first night in that house with all 6 of us around the dinner table felt like a completion of sorts. We had come so far from that day in Indianapolis, from betrayal to brotherhood, from deception to devotion, from brokenness to a new kind of wholeness that honored our scars rather than hiding them. As I looked around at these faces, I loved Charles Edward discussing engineering principles with Deborah Mary Elizabeth showing Joseph Andrew sketches for a new design, Beatrice peppering everyone with questions about their day. I felt a peace I hadn't known was possible. Our family didn't look like anyone else's, but it was strong. Our path hadn't been easy, but it had led us here to this moment of quiet joy around a shared table. And in that moment, I finally understood the true meaning of the store name we had chosen years before. New Beginning wasn't just about starting a business. It was about believing that even from the most painful endings can come beautiful new starts. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I stood in the hallway looking at the family photos that lined the wall, snapshots of birthdays and graduations, holiday gatherings, and everyday moments. In none of these photos was Arnold present, yet his absence had shaped us all. The betrayal that should have destroyed us had instead forged us into something stronger, more compassionate, more authentic. I touched the frame of a recent photo, all 6 of us at the store's 15th anniversary celebration, arms-linked faces glowing with the pride of shared accomplishment. We were no longer defined by what we had lost, but by what we had built together. In the end, that was our greatest triumph over betrayal, not just surviving it, but transforming it into the foundation of a life more meaningful than the one it had shattered. The autumn of 1996 brought our family's first wedding when Charles Edward married Anna, his colleague from the engineering firm. The ceremony took place in the community center near our home, a modest venue transformed by flowers and handmade decorations crafted by our family. Mary Elizabeth designed the floral arrangements. Joseph Andrew charmed everyone as the informal master of ceremonies, and Beatrice, though still in high school, helped coordinate the event with remarkable attention to detail. As mother of the groom, I wore a midnight blue silk dress I had designed and sewn myself elegant but understated with delicate embroidery along the neckline that had taken me weeks to perfect. Throughout the evening, women approached me asking where I had purchased such a beautiful dress. The pride I felt in saying I made it never diminished no matter how many times I repeated those words. The most touching moment came during the reception when Charles Edward raised his glass and spoke words I hadn't expected. To my mother, who taught me that family isn't defined by blood or circumstance, but by love and choice, who showed me that life's greatest challenges can become our greatest opportunities, who built a business, raised 4 children, and still found time to teach us compassion. I glanced at Deborah seated beside me at the family table and saw her eyes glistening with tears. She reached for my hand under the table and squeezed it gently. In that moment, I felt Celia's presence so strongly it nearly took my breath away. How strange life's path had been that the woman whose existence once shattered my world would become my dearest friend, and her daughter, a beloved member of my family. The following spring, Gabriel was born, my first grandchild. Charles Edward called from the hospital at 3 a.m, his voice trembling with a mixture of exhaustion and wonder. "Mom, he's here. He's perfect. Can you come?" I arrived to find Anna resting Charles Edward, looking both terrified and elated, and a tiny bundle wrapped in a hospital blanket. When my son placed Gabriel in my arms, the world seemed to pause. Looking into that tiny face, I saw echoes of Charles Edward, as a baby traces of Arnold, even a hint of Deborah in the shape of his nose. But mostly I saw a new beginning, another generation born into our unconventional family, free from the shadows of the past. As I rocked Gabriel, studying his perfect fingers and the curve of his cheek, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. Each struggle, each late night of work, each moment of doubt had been worth it to arrive here, a grandmother with a successful business, healthy children who had grown into remarkable adults, and a sense of peace I had once thought impossible. The business continued to expand through the late 1990s. Mary Elizabeth graduated with honors from Fashion Design School in 1998 and brought fresh energy to New Beginning Clothing. Her first major initiative was restructuring our design process to incorporate seasonal collections rather than producing individual pieces reactively. This seemingly simple change transformed our business model, allowing us to plan production schedules, coordinate marketing efforts, and predict inventory needs with greater accuracy. Her design aesthetic, practical but distinctive, affordable yet elegant, attracted a younger clientele without alienating our loyal customers. She introduced subtle contemporary elements to traditional designs, creating pieces that appealed across generations. The Heritage Collection, featuring updated versions of classic silhouettes from the 1950s and 60s, became our best-selling line, particularly popular with women my age, who appreciated the familiar styles reimagined with modern fabrics and details. One afternoon, as we reviewed fabric swatches for the upcoming fall collection, Mary Elizabeth shared something that touched me deeply. "Remember how I used to sit on the floor by your sewing machine when I was little?" she asked, running her fingers over a bolt of burgundy wool. "I'd watch for hours as you transformed flat fabric into dresses and shirts. I thought it was magic the way your hands knew exactly where to guide the needle, how you could envision the finished piece before you'd made a single cut." I smiled at the memory of her small face, intent on watching the needle rise and fall. "You were my most patient audience." "It wasn't patience," she corrected me. "It was fascination. I wanted to understand how you did it. Everything I know about design, about seeing potential in raw materials, about creating something both beautiful and functional, I learned watching you work your magic at that kitchen table." Joseph Andrew, always the gregarious one, found his place in sales and business development. At 23, he married his high school sweetheart, Sophia, and within 3 years they had 2 children, Emma and Thomas. Despite these early family responsibilities, he remained deeply committed to growing the business, particularly focused on expanding our corporate accounts. His natural charm and integrity made him exceptional at cultivating long-term business relationships. Where other salespeople might push for immediate profit, Joseph Andrew built trust through honesty and reliability. When a hospital administrator asked about potential cost reductions on their nursing uniform order, Joseph Andrew candidly explained our pricing structure, detailing exactly where their money went: fair wages for our seamstresses, quality materials, durable construction that would outlast cheaper alternatives. "I could promise you a lower price today," he told the administrator, "but I'd rather promise you value that lasts for years." We got the contract not because we were the cheapest option, but because Joseph Andrew had established credibility. The administrator later told me, "Your son is the first salesperson who didn't treat me like a wallet with legs." His approach to business reminded me of a conversation we'd had years earlier when he was just 16 and had begun helping with deliveries. "Mom," he'd asked, studying a receipt, "why do you charge Mrs. Fitzgerald less than Mrs. Henderson for the same alterations?" I explained that Mrs. Fitzgerald was a widow on a fixed income, while Mrs. Henderson could afford our standard rates. Joseph Andrew considered this. "So it's not just about the money. The money keeps the business running," I'd told him. "But the business exists to serve people. Sometimes that means adapting to their circumstances." He had internalized that lesson, creating a pricing structure for corporate clients that included discounts for organizations serving underrepresented communities, a policy that occasionally reduced our profit margins, but aligned perfectly with our values and ultimately attracted clients who shared those values. Beatrice, my youngest, took a different path. While her siblings gravitated toward the family business, she showed early interest in justice and advocacy. As a child, she peppered dinner conversations with questions about fairness, why some children at school had new clothes, while others wore hand-me-downs, why our neighborhood had well-maintained parks, while others had none. In 1999, she completed law school specializing in family law. She opened a modest office 2 blocks from New Beginning Clothing, focusing on cases involving women in vulnerable situations, particularly those facing divorce custody battles or domestic violence. Her legal practice operated on a sliding scale fee structure, ensuring access for clients regardless of income. For particularly vulnerable clients, she often worked pro bono, saying simply, "Someone needs to stand beside them." During lunch breaks, she would stop by the store, bringing her sharp legal mind to bear on our business operations, reviewing contracts, ensuring regulatory compliance, crafting employee policies that exceeded legal requirements while protecting the company's interests. Her dual perspective as both lawyer and family member proved invaluable as we navigated the complexities of business growth. Deborah, who had once considered pursuing a corporate career instead, chose to remain with New Beginning Clothing, stepping into the administrative role her mother had filled. Under her management, we systematized our operations, improving efficiency without sacrificing the personal touch that distinguished our business. She introduced computerized inventory tracking, standardized training for new employees, and developed a system for gathering customer feedback that informed our design and service improvements. Her business acumen, combined with a deep understanding of our company's history and values, made her the perfect steward for the operational side of the growing enterprise. By the end of the 1990s, we had expanded to 3 locations throughout Chicago, each store reflecting the character of its neighborhood while maintaining the core identity of New Beginning Clothing. Our flagship store, the original location purchased from Mrs. Wilson, remained my favorite. Its wood floors worn smooth by decades of customers, its fitting rooms constructed by Charles Edward during college summers, its display windows still featuring the artful arrangements that had been Celia's particular talent. As the millennium approached, I marveled at the transformation of my life from a betrayed wife struggling to support 4 children to the matriarch of a thriving family business. The scars remained, of course. Certain dates still brought shadows of remembered pain. Arnold's birthday, our wedding anniversary, the day I found that fateful card in his coat pocket. But these moments no longer paralyzed me. They had become signposts on a journey that had led unexpectedly to a life richer and more meaningful than the one that had been stolen from me. In January 2000, we celebrated the 20th anniversary of New Beginning Clothing with a gathering at our flagship store. The space overflowed with employees, past and present, loyal customers, suppliers who had become friends, and of course our unconventional family, now expanded to include spouses and grandchildren. Charles Edward and Anna attended with 3-year-old Gabriel and infant Elizabeth. Joseph, Andrew, and Sophia brought their toddlers Emma and Thomas, who delighted in running between the clothing racks despite their parents' attempts to corral them. Mary Elizabeth came with her fiancé Mark, a graphic designer who had created our new logo and branding materials. Beatrice arrived with David, a colleague from her law practice who looked at her with undisguised admiration. As I stood on a small platform that had been set up for the occasion, looking out at the faces of those gathered, I felt a wave of gratitude so overwhelming it momentarily robbed me of speech. Deborah stood beside me, sensing my emotion, and taking my hand in hers, the daughter life had given me through the most unlikely circumstances. We started as 2 broken women. I finally managed my voice steadier than I expected, with children to raise and hearts in pieces. We had little beyond our hands, our determination, and a skill with needle and thread. I gestured around the store at the displays of clothing, at the photographs chronicling our journey that lined the walls. "Look at what we've built together." The room fell silent, even the children somehow sensing the weight of the moment. None of this would exist without Celia. I continued, feeling her presence as strongly as if she stood beside me. She taught me that sometimes our deepest wounds become our greatest connections to others, that forgiveness isn't about excusing wrongs, but about refusing to let them define our future. I wish she could see what her daughter has helped create. I squeezed Deborah's hand, but I think perhaps she does. The business continued to evolve in the new millennium. In 2002, following Joseph Andrews' recommendation, we expanded deliberately into the corporate uniform sector, providing custom workwear for hospitals, hotels, restaurants, and other businesses requiring specialized clothing. This division provided a stability that balanced the more seasonal retail side of our operations, creating year-round employment for our growing workforce. We established a dedicated production facility for these corporate orders, investing in industrial sewing machines and specialized equipment. The expansion required significant capital, and for the first time we sought outside financing, a step I approached with trepidation, having managed the business debt-free since paying off Mrs. Wilson. The loan officer at the bank, a young woman not much older than Beatrice, reviewed our business plan with skeptical eyes. "You're proposing a significant expansion," she noted, tapping her pen against the document. "What makes you confident you can handle the increased production demands?" Charles Edward, who had taken time from his engineering work to help with the expansion planning, explained our production capacity models and staffing projections. The loan officer listened politely, but remained unconvinced. It was Deborah who finally changed her mind, pulling out a folder of testimonials from our existing corporate clients detailing our reliability, quality control, and responsive service. "We're not starting from zero," she explained. "We're building on 22 years of proven business practices and customer relationships." We secured the loan and completed the expansion on schedule and under budget, a testament to Charles Edward's planning abilities and Deborah's meticulous financial management. In 2005, Mary Elizabeth launched our most ambitious retail initiative, yet the celebration line of affordable formal and semi-formal wear. The concept grew from her observation that many women purchased expensive dresses for special occasions, wore them once, and relegated them to the back of their closets. "What if we designed dresses that could transform?" she proposed during a family business meeting. Base pieces with interchangeable elements, detachable sleeves, reversible overlays, adjustable hemlines. One dress, multiple looks at a price point working women can afford. The idea resonated with our core values of practicality and accessibility. The celebration line debuted in spring 2005 with 12 base designs and 30 mix-and-match elements. The response exceeded our projections, with pre-orders alone covering our production costs. A regional fashion magazine featured the collection, bringing unprecedented attention to our small business. Orders arrived from neighboring states, expanding our customer base beyond the Chicago area for the first time. We hired additional seamstresses, many of them immigrants with exceptional sewing skills, but limited English proficiency, women who struggled to find employment that valued their abilities. While the business thrived, what truly filled me with pride was witnessing my children, including Deborah, who had become as much my daughter as if I had given birth to her, using their talents not just for commercial success, but to improve the lives of others. Charles Edward, though not directly involved in day-to-day operations of New Beginning Clothing, embodied our values in his engineering career. In 2003, he led an initiative to bring affordable solar energy to an underserved neighborhood on the outskirts of Chicago, where residents had endured unreliable electricity service for decades. The project required navigating complex regulations, securing grants, and coordinating with community leaders, challenges that might have deterred someone with less determination. When a local reporter asked what motivated him to persist, despite the obstacles, Charles Edward's response brought tears to my eyes. "My mother taught me that difficulties aren't roadblocks, they're opportunities to find creative solutions. She faced the ultimate betrayal and transformed it into a foundation for helping others. That lesson shaped everything I do." Mary Elizabeth extended our business model to create social impact. In 2006, she established Stitch by Stitch, a program teaching sewing skills to women in transition, those recovering from domestic violence, emerging from homelessness, or rebuilding after incarceration. The program provided not just practical skills, but a supportive community. Many graduates became employees at our stores or production facility, while others launched small businesses, creating custom clothing or alterations. Mary Elizabeth ensured each participant received a sewing machine upon completion, a tool for ongoing income generation. During graduation ceremonies, she would tell the participants, "My mother rebuilt her life with needle and thread. You can too. Each stitch you make is a step forward. Each piece you complete is tangible proof of what you're capable of creating. Joseph Andrew continued expanding our business relationships, negotiating our first international partnership in 2008 with a European ethical fashion brand seeking American production capacity. The arrangement brought our manufacturing techniques to a global audience and introduced us to sustainable fabric sources that we integrated into our domestic production. During the contract negotiations, the European brand's representative questioned our pricing structure, suggesting it was too high compared to Asian manufacturers. Joseph Andrew didn't immediately counter with justifications. Instead, he arranged a tour of our production facility, introducing the representative to our seamstresses, by name explaining their benefits package, showing the child care center we had established on site. "This is where your money goes," he explained simply, "into fair wages, safe working conditions, and family support systems. We believe ethical production isn't just about the environmental impact of materials, but about the human impact of manufacturing." We secured the contract at our original price point. The European brand eventually featured our production methods in their marketing materials, highlighting the human stories behind their products. Beatrice's law practice thrived alongside her involvement with the family business. In 2004, she expanded her office, hiring 2 additional attorneys who shared her commitment to serving women in vulnerable situations. Her firm became known throughout Chicago as a place where women could find not just legal representation, but genuine understanding and practical support. She often sent clients to Mary Elizabeth's Stitch by Stitch program, recognizing that economic independence was crucial for women rebuilding after relationship breakdowns. In turn, program participants sometimes became Beatrice's clients, seeking legal assistance once they had achieved sufficient stability to address legal challenges. Deborah's contribution extended beyond managing our operations. In 2007, she established the Celia Foundation, which provided scholarships to children of single mothers. The foundation specifically focused on vocational training, recognizing that traditional college paths weren't suitable for everyone and that skilled trades offered viable career options with lower barriers to entry. "My mother and Teresa taught me that family takes many forms," she would say at scholarship ceremonies, "and that education comes through many channels. We honor both principles by supporting these students in finding their unique paths to security and fulfillment." By 2010, 8 grandchildren filled our extended family, 4 from Charles Edward and Anna, 2 from Joseph Andrew and Sophia, 1 from Mary Elizabeth and Mark, and 1 from Beatrice and David, who had married in a small ceremony at our home in 2006. Sunday dinners became joyful chaos with children racing through the house, conversations overlapping, and food always in abundance. I treasured these gatherings, observing the cousins who had no awareness of the extraordinary circumstances that had united their families. To them, our family structure was simply normal, a constellation of parents, aunts, uncles, and cousins connected by love rather than conventional bloodlines. In 2012, at 63, I decided to reduce my active participation in the business. My children and Deborah had long since proven their capability to manage and grow the enterprise, and I felt drawn to a different rhythm of life, one that allowed more time for reflection, creativity without commercial pressure, and the simple joy of watching my grandchildren discover the world. I continued visiting the stores several times weekly, designed special pieces for longtime customers, and participated in major decisions, but stepped back from day-to-day operations. This semi-retirement brought unexpected pleasures, teaching grandchildren basic sewing techniques, cultivating herbs in pots on my porch, joining a book club at the neighborhood library, rediscovering the pleasure of sewing purely for creative expression rather than commercial production. It was during this calmer phase that I began reflecting more deeply on my journey, not just the material legacy of a successful business, comfortable home, and financial security for my family, but the less tangible inheritance of values, lessons, and wisdom gained through adversity. In 2015, Beatrice convinced me to share that perspective at an event for women entrepreneurs. Initially reluctant, believing I had little to offer an audience of educated businesswomen, I finally agreed to participate in a panel discussion about building businesses while overcoming personal challenges. I expected to feel out of place among the other panelists, women with business degrees from prestigious universities, sophisticated presentations, and technical vocabularies I didn't possess. Instead, I found myself connecting deeply with both panelists and audience members through the authenticity of shared experience rather than the similarity of our credentials. After sharing my story, abbreviated but honest, about both the betrayal that catalyzed my journey and the unexpected friendship that emerged from it, the audience response overwhelmed me. Women lined up to speak with me afterward, many with tears in their eyes, sharing their own experiences of betrayal, resilience, and reinvention. One woman, perhaps 40, gripped my hand and said, "I've been stuck in bitterness for 3 years since my divorce. Today I realized I'm allowing my ex-husband to steal not just my past, but my future. Thank you for showing me another way forward." That event opened an unexpected new chapter in my life. Invitations arrived to speak at women's groups, community colleges, and business seminars. Though I never considered myself a public speaker, I found that sharing my experiences, both the practical aspects of building a business and the emotional journey of transforming pain into purpose, resonated with audiences in ways I hadn't anticipated. I spoke about concrete business strategies, how we managed cash flow during lean periods, how we built customer loyalty through personalized service, how we navigated economic downturns by diversifying our product lines. But I also addressed the deeper dimensions of entrepreneurship, particularly for women building businesses while raising families or recovering from personal setbacks. The secret, I would tell them, drawing on decades of hard-earned wisdom, isn't avoiding falls. It's learning how to rise after each one, and whenever possible, extending a hand to help someone else rise alongside you. In 2018, at 69, I participated in the most significant business decision since our founding a partnership with a national fashion brand that would allow New Beginning Clothing to expand beyond the Midwest while maintaining our values and operational independence. The negotiations lasted months with our family united in insisting on conditions that protected our employees, preserved our hiring practices, and maintained our community commitments. The signing ceremony took place in our flagship store, a deliberate choice to ground this new venture in the physical space where our business had begun. As I signed my name beside those of my children and Deborah, I marveled at the journey from that small sewing machine in my living room to this moment of national expansion. The corporate executives expressed particular interest in our employee retention rates and customer loyalty, both significantly higher than industry averages. "What's your secret?" their CEO asked during the celebration following the signing. Mary Elizabeth, now our creative director, responded thoughtfully. "We've never forgotten what it feels like to need a second chance, to require flexibility and understanding. When you build a business from that perspective, loyalty grows naturally in soil enriched by compassion." The 2020 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges to retail businesses nationwide, including ours. With stores closed by public health mandates and corporate uniform orders reduced, as hotels and restaurants struggled, we faced difficult decisions about how to maintain operations and support our employees during the crisis. Joseph Andrew led our pivot to online commerce, overcoming my long-standing resistance to digital sales channels. Deborah coordinated the technical implementation, working with consultants to create a website that captured the warmth and personal touch of our physical stores. Mary Elizabeth organized virtual fashion shows featuring employees as models, showcasing our clothing on diverse body types and ages. We also returned to our roots, producing masks, initially donating them to hospitals and vulnerable communities, then developing a retail line that combined protection with style. I returned to daily sewing at 71, working alongside our production team to meet the sudden demand, finding unexpected joy in this hands-on contribution during crisis. The pandemic reminded me of the early days after Arnold's abandonment, the uncertainty, the fear, the necessary adaptation to radically changed circumstances. But unlike then, I faced these challenges, surrounded by capable adults who brought diverse strengths to our collective response. What might have broken us individually became manageable through shared effort and mutual support. Now in 2025, at 76, I've been invited to share my story through this video series, an opportunity that prompted mixed feelings among my family. Some worried about exposing our private history to public scrutiny, while others saw potential value in sharing experiences that might help others navigating similar challenges. Beatrice Ever the Advocate ultimately convinced me. Your story deserves telling, Mom. Not because it's extraordinary, but because it's universal in its themes: betrayal, resilience, forgiveness, reinvention. These are human experiences that connect us across differences. By sharing how you transformed pain into purpose, you might help someone else find their way through darkness. Setting up for this recording in my living room, surrounded by family photographs, mementos from our business journey, and the vintage sewing machine I've kept through decades of upgrades, I reflect on the strange alchemy that transformed the worst day of my life into the catalyst for its most meaningful chapter. I never remarried after Arnold, though there were relationships over the years, good men who brought companionship and affection into my life. But I never felt the need to formalize these connections. My family, my children, Deborah, my grandchildren, and the ever-present memory of Celia filled my heart completely. Arnold remains a shadowy figure in our family history. We learned of his death in 1986, just 8 years after he disappeared from our lives, through a distant relative who happened upon his obituary. A highway accident somewhere in Tennessee had ended his life at 45. By then we had moved so far beyond him that the news felt almost abstract, like learning about the death of a character from a book read long ago. When grandchildren began asking about their missing grandfather, we told the truth appropriate to their ages, not to perpetuate bitterness, but to honor the reality that shaped our family. Your grandfather made choices that caused pain. I would explain when they were old enough to understand. But without those choices, our family wouldn't be what it is today. You wouldn't have this particular constellation of parents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. Sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead to unexpected blessings. It seems strange to acknowledge a debt to the man who betrayed me so profoundly. Yet without that birthday card in his coat pocket, without that desperate journey to Indianapolis, without that painful confrontation in Celia's shop, I might never have discovered my capacity for resilience, my entrepreneurial abilities, or the deep friendship that would transform both betrayal and abandonment into something meaningful. New beginning. Clothing has grown beyond anything I could have imagined when I first set up that secondhand sewing machine in my living room. Today, the company operates 17 stores across the Midwest, maintains an international online presence, and employs over 200 people, many of them women who came to us through second chance hiring programs or Mary Elizabeth's Stitch by Stitch initiative. Last month, I received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Chicago Chamber of Commerce for contributions to local business and community development. Standing at the podium looking out at the audience, my family in the front row, employees past and present scattered throughout the crowd, women whose lives had been touched by our various programs filling several tables, I felt a sense of completion that transcended personal accomplishment. Success, I told them, isn't measured by what you accumulate, but by what you overcome. It isn't defined by how high you climb, but by how many people you bring with you. And true wealth isn't counted in dollars, but in lives touched, hope kindled, and light created from darkness. The wrinkles on my face map a life of both laughter and tears. My hands, now slightly trembling with age, but still capable of precise stitches, carry the memory of each garment sewn, each child embraced, each tear dried, each challenge met. These hands fed my children, built a business, supported other women, and now teach my 5-year-old great-granddaughter how to guide fabric through a sewing machine, passing skills and values to a 4th generation. If I could speak to that young Teresa of 1978, terrified, betrayed, facing an uncertain future with children to support, and few marketable skills, I would tell her, the path ahead is difficult. There will be days when you'll want to surrender to despair. But you possess a strength you haven't yet discovered, a resilience that will surprise you, a capacity for forgiveness that will ultimately free you rather than the person who wronged you. And I would tell her that the greatest triumph over betrayal isn't in revenge or even in mere survival. It's in creating a life so rich with meaning and connection that the betrayal becomes merely one chapter in a much larger, more beautiful story. That birthday card I found in Arnold's coat pocket could have been the end of my story. Instead, it was the beginning of a journey I could never have imagined, one that transformed not just my life, but the lives of 2 families, countless employees, and thousands of customers over nearly 5 decades. As I look directly into the camera recording this story, I see beyond it to all of you watching some, perhaps in the midst of your own betrayals, heartbreaks, or seemingly impossible situations. I can't promise an easy path forward. I can't guarantee that pain will transform quickly into purpose. But I can assure you that within yourself lies everything needed to build something meaningful from the broken pieces of what was lost. The power to begin again isn't granted by others, but claimed through your own choices, often beginning with small, uncertain steps forward when every instinct urges retreat. Sometimes those first steps lead to unexpected allies like Celia became for me. Sometimes they reveal strengths you never knew you possessed. Always they demonstrate that your story isn't finished when disaster strikes, it's simply taking an unexpected turn. Life's tapestry contains threads of many colors, some vibrant with joy, others dark with sorrow. But it's the contrast between these threads that creates depth and meaning in the pattern. My tapestry contains the dark thread of Arnold's betrayal, but also golden threads of my children's accomplishments, silver threads of friendship with Celia, vibrant threads of a business built from necessity, and sturdy threads of lessons learned and wisdom earned through adversity. Looking back now, I wouldn't remove even the darkest thread, for without it, the pattern of my life would be unrecognizable, lacking the very elements that made it uniquely meaningful. This is perhaps life's greatest paradox, that our deepest wounds can become our most profound sources of healing, not just for ourselves, but for others we meet along the way. If this story has resonated with you, please consider giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing to the Grandma's Diary channel. I'd be especially grateful if you would share in the comments where you're watching from and whether any particular aspect of this story touched your heart. Perhaps you know someone facing their own moment of betrayal or reinvention who might find hope in this journey. If so, please share this video with them. Thank you for accompanying me on this journey through memory and meaning. In sharing our stories, we remind one another that no experience, however painful, need define us permanently. We always retain the power to write new chapters, create new beginnings, and transform even betrayal into triumph.